Hello everyone, welcome back to Nanbai. This is me Ankita and today we are making macarons. Now today we're just making very simple macarons. We're not adding any color to it. We are not going for some fancy flavor. We're just making simple plain macarons. As we all know, macaron is a very tricky recipe. It takes a lot of practice and patience to get that perfect macaron. Macaron has four main ingredients, which is egg whites, granulated sugar, powdered sugar and almond flour. Now not to confuse almond flour with almond meal. For macarons we use flour and not meal. How to separate your yolks from the white? One good way of doing it is when the eggs are very cold. When you take the egg right out of the fridge, you separate it right then and there. Reason being, the yolk is easily going to peel away from the egg whites when it's cold. If it's at room temperature, there is a chance that the egg yolk might break. But if in case you're separating the yolk and it does happen to break and fall into your egg white, you just don't use that egg. Grab another one from the refrigerator and use a fresh one. Because if there's any speck of yolk in your egg whites, the egg whites are not going to whip up very well. Another thing that you could probably do to ensure that there is no grease in your egg white is wash your hands twice before you touch the inside of that egg. You wash your hands, dry them properly and then separate your white and the yolk so that we are 100% sure that there's no grease going into it. The same thing goes for the bowl. Wash your bowl and the attachment. Whether you're using a hand mixer or a stand mixer, wash the bowl, wash the attachment, let it air dry and then use it. Then we know our hands were clean, the bowl is clean, there's no chance of grease getting into your egg white and then it will whip up properly. Now another thing that they recommend while making macarons is to age the egg whites. Now what does aging of an egg white mean? That just simply means you're going to separate the yolk and the white and then put the white in an airtight container and leave it in the refrigerator for at least up to 48 hours. I mean, you could use it just after 24 hours, but ideally 48 hours would be a good time period to leave the egg whites in the refrigerator. Then when you're about to make your macarons, take the egg white out of the fridge, leave it at room temperature for about 30 to 45 minutes, let it come at room temperature and then start whipping it up. Cold egg whites is not going to whip up very well as compared to a room temperature egg white. So remember, when you're making your macarons, you have to age your eggs and when you take them out of the fridge, they have to be at room temperature. Now, the powdered sugar and the almond flour usually have a lot of lumps in them. So we are going to be sifting the almond flour and the powdered sugar twice before we add it to our meringue. Now, I would recommend sifting it twice before you start preparing the meringue, because once you are making the meringue, you want all your concentration to be on those whipping eggs. So sift it twice before, keep it ready, so when your meringue is done, you can just start folding it in right away. So we're going to start by sifting the almond flour and the powdered sugar together. Now we are going to be sifting this one more time. Now as you can see, we have some stuff that is stuck in the sieve. That is exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to take these particles out. We will not put them back in the sifted rice. And now that this has been sifted twice, it is ready to mix up in the meringue. So let's start preparing our meringue. Start by whipping the egg whites on medium-high speed till they are frothy. Once the egg whites look like this, it is time to add the granulated sugar. But do keep in mind, we have to add little by little. If we dump all the sugar in one go or pour the sugar in really fast, the egg whites won't whip up properly and the meringue won't be very stable. Try to pour the sugar between the bowl and the whisk so that it doesn't splatter everywhere. Once all the sugar is in and the meringue starts to look like this, it is a good time to scrape your bowl to bring in any sugar if stuck to the side of the bowl back inside. As you can see, we have started to achieve the stiff peaks. So we are very close to getting our meringue done. But to ensure whether the sugar is dissolved or not, it's probably a good idea to touch the meringue and feel the grittiness. If you still feel the sugar, then maybe it is a good idea to go a couple minutes longer. At this point, I have stiff peaks, and when I touch the meringue, I do not feel any sugar in it. That means all of it is dissolved. It is time to take the meringue off the stand mixer. The egg white is whipped up and you can see there are stiff peaks. So this is what we want, stiff peaks. And now I'm ready to put the flour mixture in and then we'll mix it up. Now in case if you do want to add color to your macaron, I would add the gel food coloring while I'm whipping up the egg whites, while I'm making the meringue. That is a good time to, you can do it in the end, but trust me, it works better when you add your gel food coloring while you're making your meringue. Once the meringue is almost ready, add a couple drops, however dark or light you want to go, and you can get the color then. And it'll give you a better result. So let's go ahead and mix this up. So since this is a small recipe, I'm going to just dump all of this in one go and then very carefully start mixing this up. Once all the flour is mixed in, just rub the batter against the wall of the bowl to release any air bubble and also to knock some air out. While making a macaron batter, we have heard about the word macaronage. So, what we're looking for is the macaronage stage. That is, when you leave the batter, it should be free-flowing, not runny, not stiff, but it should fall down off the spatula without much effort. That means our batter is now ready to pipe. Okay, the batter is now ready and it is time to pipe our macarons. I am using a plain round tip. And now you'll see some people like using a smaller tip, some people like using a bigger tip. I like this one somehow. My macarons rise straight up when I use a slightly bigger one. So this is like a medium-sized round tip. And if you want the exact number, this is an Echo 806 that I'm using to pipe. And I have a piping bag. Cut a hole. And then with macarons, it is a good idea both your hands are free. So I have a glass here in which I'm going to put the piping bag. And that makes it easy to just pour your batter in. Now you're going to pour this batter. just to make sure there are no air bubbles in between, I have a little bench scraper and I'm going to push this. There we go. So all the batter is in the front, tight. Go around like this, not too much, because you don't want it to start coming out from here. Then grab your tray. So I'm using a silpat over here. You could use parchment, but remember, when I'm using a silpat, the time that it takes to bake will differ from how much it takes in the parchment. And of course, because the silpat is thick, so I'm using a single tray. If you are using parchment, I would recommend, so it doesn't become brown from the bottom, if you could double your tray, that will prevent them from burning from the bottom and even the sides. So I'm using a silpat, that's why it's just a single tray, but if you're using a parchment, just double your tray. Now we are making small sized macarons, and this is going to give me 1 full tray probably. This is a very, very small recipe, and when you're piping this, pipe it straight, as in just like this. You don't want your piping bag to be tilted like this, it has to be absolutely straight, because otherwise then you're going to have lopsided macarons, which is not good. They'll be like bending from one side and high from one side. So pipe it very, very straight. I'm done piping these macarons, and they're not too big, they're not too small, they're just the ideal size. And if the batter consistency is right, those peaks on top will disappear. If not, you could just wet your finger a little bit and press it down, but that also means that it's going to take longer to dry. Now once these are piped, it is time to tap it to release any kind of air bubble. So it's going to be a little noisy. Now once you're done tapping, you will see a few air bubbles. So you could just take something like a toothpick or a needle and just pop those bubbles. Now once you're done popping the bubbles, and now we're going to let them sit. I usually let them sit for about an hour till when you touch them, it's kind of firm on the top. So now that depends on the level of humidity in your area, the temperature, so how dry it is or how humid it is. Usually for me it takes about 45 to 60 minutes. So, but the best way of judging this is it can happen even in 30 minutes for you, So you just have to touch the top, and if the skin is, it has formed the skin, it's dry from the top and the batter is not coming into your hands anymore, that means that your macarons are ready to bake. So I'm going to let this sit for at least about 45 minutes, then I'll check them, and then once if they're done, we'll bake the macarons. So these have been sitting for about 50 minutes and it has formed a skin on top, that is. Now if you see, I touch it, nothing happens to this. So it is not leaving an impression, it's not coming on my fingers. A skin has formed, that means they're ready to go in the oven. So I've preheated the oven to a 300 degrees Fahrenheit, which is also a 149 degrees Celsius. Again, the temperature, now it depends how hot or how less hot your oven is. So for my oven 300 Fahrenheit works very well. For your oven it might be a different temperature, so that only once you make macarons a few times you would probably be able to figure out the correct temperature at which the macarons bake. But these ones, I think 300 should be okay. So I'm going to start baking these for I'm going to bake this for about 20-22 minutes, and first 10 minutes, then I'm going to rotate the tray and then bake for another 10 minutes or 12 minutes depending how long it takes. So while the macarons are baking, we are going to prepare the filling. So I'm trying to keep the filling really simple here. Since they are plain macarons, they have no color. So we're just filling it up with some chocolate buttercream. And we're making American buttercream here. We're not making any fancy Swiss meringue buttercream and all of that. So I have some cubed room temperature butter, some powdered sugar and some cocoa powder. And I am going to start by beating up this butter first. And then you just take a, once you can see that it's kind of looking like this, just stop the mixer and scrape your bowl nicely. And now add the powdered sugar. Sift it. Always sift your powdered sugar. Whatever you're using powdered sugar in, doesn't matter. Just always sift it. That's like one rule that you should always follow. Reason being, because powdered sugar always has a lot of lumps in it. So just sift it. So there we go. Now on low speed, start mixing this again. If you are going to increase the speed, it's all going to fly in your face, so we don't want that. So dip it in first, very slowly. There. Start slowly. Now this would probably be a good time to stop and scrape your bowl once. Once the powdered sugar and the butter have come together, then it is time to add some cocoa powder and of course sift it again. There we go. And again on low speed, start. Because you don't want it to be flying in your face. So let's scrape the bowl once very quickly. So you can see this is a little firm, it's a little thick. So what I'm going to do is I am going to add maybe just half a tablespoon of heavy cream and the consistency will be right. So I'm going to add just a splash of heavy cream. And we can scrape the bowl and check once if it is at what we want. So maybe just a little more. It's at this consistency, it's still a little stiff. So maybe just a little more cream. And I think that we should be okay. This is looking good. So this is pipeable, it's soft, it's smooth. And we have our filling for the macarons. So I'm going to clean all of this up, put it in a piping bag, and then I'm going to go check on the macarons. The macarons are finally out of the oven and they took 21 minutes to be precise. Now in my oven with the still pan it has taken 21 minutes. For you, it can take probably longer or maybe less. I don't think so, but maybe a little longer. So do watch out. There is no way to test it. The thing about macarons is when they're in the oven and you want to see if the bottom is done, you try to pluck it out, they will just collapse. You have to wait for it to cool to actually see whether they are done or not. So all you can see is that the feet, they start to look, kind of, they're not sticking to the mat or the parchment that you're using, and you will see little bit of change in color in the bottom, which is a sign that they are kind of done. Otherwise, there's no other way to really find out. So 21 minutes it took for me to get these things done. I am very eager to peel one of these away, but I'm not going to do that because then they will break. So I will wait for it to cool down, and then hopefully they should come out without any trouble. They have cooled down, so I did let it cool completely. Now the tray is nice and cold. So don't be impatient to pluck these out right away. Just let them cool down. That is very, very important. Otherwise, you might just end up ruining some of your macarons. So with our fingers crossed, let's peel them from the mat and see if they are done from the bottom or not. And there we go. That is a perfect looking macaron. It has the ideal feet, it has the perfect base, and that is what the macaron should look like. There we go. So there's another way of testing, like if your macaron is good enough or not. Some people just flick it, you drop it, and it shouldn't really crack. So if it passes the crash test, then that means the macaron is good. So I'm going to peel the rest of them. And there we go. I think all of them are done. Now I've already put the filling that we prepared in a piping bag, and I'm using a round tip again. I'm not trying to go fancy with these macarons because it's always important to get the basics correct first. So no fancy design on this, just a plain round tip, kind of a less than a medium sized, bigger than a small sized piping tip here I have, and I've filled up the filling. So let's start filling up the macarons. There we go. We have our macarons filled with chocolate buttercream. So I'm going to fill all of these first, and then we will, I would like to mention a couple things before we conclude the video. So I am finished filling up all the macarons, and they look absolutely beautiful. I've kept them really simple this time, nothing fancy, because it is very important to get these right first. That is another reason that this recipe is very, very, very small. It is going to probably give you around, depending on whether you're making really small ones or slightly medium-sized ones, it will give you around 10 to 12 macarons after you're done sandwiching them, which is ideal if you're practicing or still learning how to make macarons. You don't want to be wasting all your precious ingredients. You don't want them to go in the bin. Now, if you're wondering why I did not add any color to the macarons today, is because when you're learning how to make macarons, it is probably a good idea to not add any coloring. Once you have, you start achieving the right kind of macaron is when you go to the next level, that is adding colors. So when you're making this recipe, I would recommend that you keep it simple, not add any color, and focus on getting the feet correct, the height correct, the mixing method correct, and that's it. So try this recipe out. I really hope this was helpful, and thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video.